Welcome back, everybody, to These Aren't the Nerds You're Looking For. Lorenzo and Kevin sitting here with...
Kevin Horn.
How's it going, my man?
It's going good, dude.
Yeah.
We're episode 150 today.
Yes.
And it is my youngest daughter's second birthday, so...
Yeah.
I had to work all day, but got off work and got to come home and hang out with the little one and eat some cake. We had our birthday party over the weekend. It was nice.
Nice, yeah. And you were talking about the weather is nice and hot.
Super hot. Not very pleasant. It's going to be hotter tomorrow.
Hey, we're full in summer now, man. Which is really weird to think about because in my head there has been no transition from spring to this just because of...
Yeah, and we're what, 5 actual days into summer now? Saturday was the first day of summer.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, we're actually in official summer, and between just staying at home and like having Memorial Day pass and I just at home, you know, everything's been the same. So it's just like, yeah, I guess this is summer.
So do you guys have pools and stuff open out there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or like public pools. I don't know about that. I will say that the complex in which I live has a pool.
And it is open?
It is open. And they put a warning up there like, hey, follow all the COVID rules. Like, you enter this public area at your own risk, you know?
Right.
You don't gather with too many people here, right?
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, like, public beaches and stuff have been open for a while out here.
Gotcha.
So, and that was like a big hullabaloo for a while. Like back in April, even, I think. Again, it's June, man. Like, where has time gone?
I have no idea, buddy.
That's what I mean. Like, I'm like, is it really summer? Because on my end, it's been the exact fucking same thing this whole time. So,
yeah, it's almost fucking July. But
I know. Oh God, yeah, we're almost into the next holiday. So,
which is going to be at least around here pretty uneventful because all 4th of July celebrations have been canceled.
Right.
So I imagine that all of my wonderful neighbors in the neighborhood are going to be pissing off my dog and shooting fireworks off. It's always a great time of year. But I may see some light celebration in the sky. So there's that.
Just, you know, different battles happening in the sky. That's all.
Yep.
What we are actually here to talk about is the Clone Wars Frontrunners. This
Season
is
5, Episode 3.
Yes. So we're moving right along here. This episode has another split air date of October 12th, 2012 for Canada, and then October 13th, 2012 for everywhere else. Directed by Stuart Lee and written by Chris Collins. We have a fortune cookie that is to seek something is to believe in its possibilities.
You got any thoughts on this one?
No.
So I immediately went to Qui-Gon, and then I also thought Ahsoka Tano. So
I like Ahsoka.
You like
Ahsoka for this one?
Yeah.
It's just this one was just another one of those weird ones where I'm just like I get what it's trying to say. It's just a generic phrase otherwise, right?
Yeah.
This one doesn't stand out as like a strong fortune cookie like some are, right?
Yes.
So, yeah, for this one I'm fine with Ahsoka.
So last week / yesterday for us, we decided that the fortune cookie was baloney when looking at the episode. Didn't have anything to do with anything. How do you feel about this one?
You know what's funny? Having had that conversation yesterday and then jumping to this episode today, I feel like that fortune cookie from that episode would have applied better to this episode.
Okay.
And this one almost, now that I'm thinking about it, would have applied better to A War on Two Fronts.
I'm with you.
Right? So it's so weird because, like, we'll get into it, but there is this weird subplot about fear amongst citizens.
Mm-hmm.
in this episode.
Mm-hmm.
And yesterday's or last week's quote, fortune cookie, would not have applied 100%, but at least it would have been in the thematic range, right?
What was that? It was fear is malleable as a weapon or something?
Yeah, something like that. I've already... Fear is a malleable weapon.
Yep.
Is all it is. So, yeah. I feel like that would have applied so much better to this episode.
Yeah, and in retrospect, I would say that King Rash, a character that we meet in this episode, probably said that thing last week, but
right,
we already attributed it to whomever we did.
Dooku, right?
Dooku. And
yeah,
it's been set in stone, man. You can't change it.
Yeah, no. Well, especially because like it's just the way the context works. It's we met King Rash, who is in fact named in this episode. We met him in the newsreel last week. Like,
did we?
There was like a one shot of him sitting in a throne.
Oh, that's right. I do remember.
That's it. Yeah, it's just like one quick shot of him in a throne, and they give like a quick update on that situation.
Mm-hmm.
We meet him properly here. And then jumping into this one, the newsreel for this episode is especially long too, I felt. And I don't know why that was entirely necessary, because the newsreel for this episode actually made me more confused about what was going on, even though the episode proper seemingly starts pretty soon after where we left off the previous episode.
It does. And we can get into the timeline a little bit more later.
Right. But like what confuses me based on what the newsreel is saying is that so there are two sections to this newsreel essentially. The first part basically recaps the episode from last week, A War on Two Fronts. Mm-hmm. Then it provides extra context for the episode of which we are about to watch.
Right.
And it gives way more details than I feel like could be tallied in the short amount of time that would have passed between these two episodes, such as the last sentence itself says, despite the absence of civilian casualties, public fear has ensued as reports of rebels' daring strikes circulate throughout the city.
Okay. Do you just...
Go ahead.
I was going to say, do you just want to talk about the timeline and like what the time dilation is between last week's and this week's, between A War on Two Fronts and Front Runners?
Sure.
The way that I'm reading this is that at the end of A War on Two Fronts, everybody split up and said, let's look for some supplies. We're going to do these things. We'll meet up tonight or tomorrow, right? Mm-hmm. So this is the following day.
This is the following day?
This is the following day, not in the morning. So they've had a half a day's worth of organized activity, right?
Right.
This is the evening the following day.
I'll sort of buy that.
There are, I think, two lines of dialogue that support this. So at one point in time, there is a droid that says, this is the 5th attack this rotation. And I know we've talked about it before, but I think a rotation is a day, right? A single rotation of the planet.
Yep.
So it's the 5th attack this day, right? But it's, I think, the first or the second one that we see, right?
Yeah.
And then also, like, after the attacks die down a little bit, and obviously we'll get to this a little bit later, there is a little clandestine meeting. And during this, Rex says something about today has just been a tease of what's to come.
Okay.
So it's like, this is... Okay, maybe it's not the next day, but it's definitely like the first day of them doing anything. But yeah. I would imagine that them going to the city of Iziz, splitting up at the end of A War on Two Fronts, going to kind of get the supplies or whatever they need, right? And then Saw Gerrera said, we'll coordinate. I don't remember if he said if it will coordinate this evening or in the morning, right?
Yeah.
So then they coordinate either in the evening or in the morning, and then the following day they start to put their plan into action of essentially terrorizing the city. And we meet partway through that day of active resistance.
Okay.
So this is the following night.
I'll buy that. It's just, again, the way the newsreel words it just makes it sound like quite a bit has happened, and it's because of the way they mention that the reports of this activity has circulated throughout the city, right?
Yeah, I wonder what and I didn't look into it, I wonder what the population of this city is, like how big this place is, because we've seen some stuff before in the Clone Wars, and you look into it, and it's a city of like 20,000 people.
Yeah.
Something small, but it seems significant in the actions of whatever the people are doing in the city, right? Like it's significant for Saw and his group to be doing what they're doing, even if Iziz, relatively on a galactic scale, is just a drop, not even in the bucket, but like a drop in the ocean.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay.
Second thing I want to bring up as far as timeline goes. So according to Wikipedia and the episode chronology, this is in 20 BBY. A War on Two Fronts, 20 BBY. Season 4, episode 22, Revenge, states that it is set between 20 and 19 BBY.
Oh, right.
So I don't know if this stuff is supposed to be happening concurrently, but I feel like we have some character overlap. Like, it's just a weird choice to say between 20 BBY and 19 BBY, and then like the next series of episodes is 20 BBY. So I don't know if there was a time jump there that we didn't notice, and obviously that is really insignificant to the overall story as to what between 20 and 19 BBY means. Like it's a New Year celebration or something. But I thought it was worth noting that even within their own chronology, there seems to be a little hiccup that doesn't quite make sense.
Well, because like for some of that stuff, I still have questions about the source of information such as that, right? There are still things on Wikipedia that I kind of take carefully, right? I won't go as far as saying like I take it with a grain of salt, right?
Right.
But there are times where I'm just like, where's this?
Maybe.
Yeah. Like I need hard sources for some of this shit, Because so much of with how Star Wars works sometimes, there are gaps of information for a lot of things, right? There's a lot of other sources that will fill in other information, which is fun, right? Visual dictionaries and stuff like that. But then when it comes to timeline things, that's always kind of harder to place.
Well,
right?
I'm sure that there's some other media out there that, be it a comic book or whatever, or a short story that is
book or
who knows, that referenced the events of Revenge, perhaps, and maybe a line of dialogue like placed it at a certain time, so then Wikipedia has to say, hey, it's between these 2 years.
I guess
that would be my guess.
I don't know. Getting into the episode proper here, so we start with seeing them doing these strikes across the city. Pretty quickly is when we get that first line of fifth attack in one rotation, right? So they're just attacking these rebels. So that's Anakin, that's Obi-Wan, that's Ahsoka, Rex, and Saw Gerrera, Steela Gerrera, and Lux Bonteri. They have just been wreaking havoc. And the way that we kind of see the citizens react is mild panic sometimes, where they sort of make a point to show that the citizens see that this is happening, and most of them have this fearful reaction of running away, right? Because even though the newsreel brings up that there have been no civilian casualties, most of these attacks are based off of what we saw the previous episode using like EMPs and stuff
the
like
droid
that.
poppers.
Yeah, the droid poppers, so they won't harm organic beings and materials, but only the droids. So they're using all of those tactics that we did see them using in the previous episode.
I think it's also worth noting that there's like you can't attack an army of individuals, be it organic or droid, and like even if your attack is targeted at them, like their defense of themselves or their retaliation is going to be in the version of blaster fire, or,
right? Yeah, like there's going to be some collateral damage at some point, right?
Right. Even if you're like, oh, we're doing our thing, like, yeah, but they're not going to respect your wishes and be like, oh, we're only going to attack you people because you're attacking it, you know?
Right. They'll start blindly firing out of just the chaos that will ensue for sure.
Right.
And then pretty quickly, we get a scene with the king named Rash. So King Rash, his first name is Sanjay. So Sanjay Rash. He is the current king of Onderon.
Yep.
And he is getting reports about the terrorist attacks that are happening around Iziz. So then he has his predecessor brought from the palace dungeons to accuse this guy of organizing the terrorist actions, to which the predecessor king, who I don't recall being named, but his name is Ramses Dendup.
They call him Dendup.
Dendup, okay.
There's that weird alien that has like the two rectums on the back of his head.
Yeah.
Who I find a much more impelling character than King Rash. But that's neither here nor there. Does say we've gone to get Dendum, and then he has a conversation with the king, and then King Rash says, "Bring my predecessor in," and then they bring the king in, or the previous king. I like this Dendup character. We see him briefly,
very briefly,
but he straight up stands up to this king. And because the gist of this conversation is that Rash is blaming Dendup for these insurgencies, right?
Right.
And says, you need to fix it, call off the attacks. And he says, you made it impossible for me to get any communication, so this is all news to me. Like, I've been imprisoned, and you've done that well. So, he's basically like, congratulations to you, you've cut me off.
Yeah.
And
there's no communications in the dungeons.
Right. And then he goes on to challenge the king, and he says, if you want these things to stop, then you need to take a plan of action by getting rid of the droid army that's here. Like, you are to blame for what's happening because your actions have caused these people to revolt against this occupation. So if you want to end the attacks, end the occupation.
Well, Dendup also basically, the thing that's more pointed to me is that Dendup is like, hey, this sounds like the thing a king could do, but I'm not king. You are.
Right.
I'm not. So that part I did enjoy. I'm just going to call it right here. Rash, to me, is not an interesting character at all.
No. Not at all.
He's very caricature-ish. Like, there's like the shell of an idea that the writers want to push across.
Right. Even with his look.
Yeah, I both like and didn't care for. I know this is like, that's a cheap criticism. The stylings that they try and give this palace, it's pretty ornate. There's a lot of details going on. The stylings that they give the King Rash, and the architecture and the interior design, furnishings, and even down to the getup that Dendup is in, does, like, it all works together really well.
Right.
But it's dressing up a lot of emptiness, right? Like, I still don't have, like, a real sense for Rash at all. And again, I've been using this a lot, but Rash is literally a character that I didn't remember existed at all.
Yeah.
You know, so that doesn't bode well at all.
I'm with you.
My memory of this guy. I'm pretty sure by next week I'll have forgotten that he exists again.
I did not remember seeing him in the newsreel of the previous episode, and it's really just a glory shot of his throne room with him sitting on it looking kingly.
Exactly.
The rest of his throne room is completely empty, sans a couple of, like, torch pyre things that sit to the right and left of his actual stone throne. And he just kind of sits around and eats Jogan fruit and consults with this alien guy that we don't get a name of.
Not at all.
I would actually like to know more information about that guy, and I don't care about this King Rash. But he does seem to have a pretty sweet view of what looks like the entire city.
Yeah.
Which tells me that this place is not that large.
Yeah, but he has, it's like a 360 balcony situation, right? Like, so, and yeah, I don't know.
I have two other small notes about Dendup, and one is that I could have sworn that he was voiced by Tom Kane, because he has like Tom Kane as Yoda has like a specific pronunciation. I'm not talking about like the Yodis,
right?
But the guy that voiced Dendup sounded so familiar. I was like, oh, that's totally Tom Kane. That's just like a modification of the Yoda voice without the Yodis, but it's totally not. It's another dude. And then I absolutely expected him to be killed at this point. We don't see him again in the story, or at least this episode. But like the tension builds, and he like challenges King Rash, and then like they almost have a stare off, and like the music kind of mystifies the situation, and then we just cut to something else.
Right. Yeah, we cut back to the Jedis and the rebels, as we will call them. They're in a safe house, so it's like a dark room, basically, and they're trying to figure out their next move.
And this is where Rex makes that comment, today was only a taste. Yeah,
it was only a taste. Anakin is like real proud and confident about the abilities of these rebels. But Obi-Wan brings up that they have to be careful that what they are doing is leaving the general public fearful of the rebels, and therefore it wouldn't help their cause. It would make the public turn against them. So
this is totally a thing that happens, and it's totally a thing that is happening in society right now.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. This idea could not be more timely in the weirdest way.
Yep.
Lux and Steela both agree that they must win over the people in order to win the battle, to win this war, right? So Anakin and Obi-Wan and Rex are going to return to Coruscant and report to the Jedi. They're going to have Ahsoka stay behind to continue advising the rebels.
Yeah, so Anakin asks her, he's like, hey, you want to come back to Coruscant? She's like, I think I'm good here. And he's like, okay. He says to her, remember your purpose. And I think this is supposed to like build on that weird love triangle thing that wasn't developed in the last episode, because Ahsoka
that Anakin noticed for a second. Anakin noticed it and was like, "Hey, are you here with us? Are you focused? what's going on? And Ahsoka in the last episode, it's like, oh no, it's chill. I'm real cool. And this one, again, even when Anakin asks, Anakin's like, unless you want to go back and somebody else can stay. And then there is a slight pause before Ahsoka accepts to stay on Onderon. So it's a weird moment. It could play into whatever else is happening, but to be honest, this idea barely comes back up here and there again. They touch upon it throughout the episode, but it's never in the forefront. So it just kind of it feels.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say they touch upon it. It's like things happen and you can tell that Ahsoka's either overthinking them or straight up like feeling some jealousy.
Right. So it's this weird thing that happens where they forget about it, and then when they remember it, or when they have like a direct opportunity to address it, it's so heavy-handed in that moment that it becomes overpowering for a second, but then they just immediately move on, you know?
Right.
So there's no light touch to this.
I agree with you.
Bit that's going on. And I still don't know where we're going with any of this business. That said, Ahsoka stays. So the next plan that they're trying to put together is that Lux suggests attacking the city's main power station.
Real quick before we get to that, did you catch what Obi-Wan said? Like, so Obi-Wan's like, all right, cool. We're going to leave. You're going to stay. Great. And then he says to Ahsoka, we will continue to provide supplies and credits.
Yes. Yeah.
But make sure that they essentially learn to rely on themselves. Like, we're going to support them. Like, this all seems bonkers to me.
I agree.
Because when this plan started, like when Saw and Lux Skyped into the Jedi Council, nobody was convinced, and Anakin's like, we have to support these people because these, like, they're small groups like this out there. These are the support that we don't have. So, like, if we can just teach them, like, they're going to help fight the fight, right? They're doing the good deed. And finally, Obi-Wan is like, observe and train or whatever, and that's it. And then in A War on Two Fronts, they end up, like, leading an attack, which is complete opposite of what Obi-Wan said they were allowed to do earlier in that episode. And then now Obi-Wan's like, yeah, sure, man, we're going to give you credits, we're going to give you supplies, like, we will be your crutch.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, Ahsoka, make sure that we can take the crutch away eventually. Right.
Yeah, I agree. The lines that they're drawing are bizarre, to say the least. It's weird. It's all weird. So with that support, they're going to attack the main power station.
Yep.
The idea behind that is that even though the droids aren't reliant on it for their operations, they are reliant on it to actually recharge themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So with the main power station gone, the droids will eventually run out of battery power, I suppose, and therefore disable that army in some fashion. So they need more information for that attack. So Saw very quickly ambushes a battle droid and just literally takes his head off and runs away with it.
He's like, "Oh, you need a droid head?" And
got
one. Slides off a roof, runs down, rips the head off, comes back up, slaps a suction cup on its forehead, and they get all the information they need, which is strictly a map, and that's it.
It's a map with location of where the defenses will be. So they kind of figure out where they shouldn't lead a direct assault. But then they come up with another plan to basically create a sort of diversion that hopefully calls in reinforcements. Then they are hoping that the reinforcements are a tank that they can then steal and hijack to then use and blow up the facility.
Is this a sound plan?
No, not at all. There are way too many things outside of your control, right?
Right.
So
even if they already had a tank, which they do,
right? I was confused by that.
It's
too.
just not in the city.
Yeah.
And even if they could steal a tank and destroy, like, assume that they can do all those things. They get the tank, they destroy the powerhouse, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they're just gonna wait around for however long for the batteries to die on these droids. Like,
I guess
we've seen battles that have lasted days.
Yeah.
And the droids are still operational.
Right.
We have seen droids' batteries drained as well, but that's presumably after extended use, and it's just like we'll unplug the lights and then we'll just sit around until everybody gets hungry and their refrigerators fail and they can't eat anymore, and they've got to go to the grocery store type deal.
Right. The other, stepping back for a hot second too, the other thing I found interesting is that there's a joke that happens when Saw rips off the head of the droid, where the droid reaches into the empty void of where its head would have been.
Mm-hmm.
But then, if you recall from last week, Obi-Wan has that comment, or Rex has that comment, where if you get rid of the head, then it destroys everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And again, they are immediately just disregard all of that.
Anyways, the dialogue in these two episodes is contradictory to the actions of the episodes themselves.
Right, yeah. Like, immediately so. Basically, they announce this plan, and then we see it in action, and it pretty much plays out as they announced it would. So they indeed ambush a droid patrol. They basically take down all the droids, save for one of them, and then they... Again, this is why this plan is so weird. It's awkward to watch as well, in terms of they take out all these droids, and there's one droid that's still standing there.
Mm-hmm.
But they have to wait for it to do its thing to call in for reinforcements. And it does so at a slow-ass pace, and I don't understand why it took so long for any of the droids to call for reinforcements.
This droid is also making some assumptions, right?
Uh-huh.
Because what they do is they park a vehicle, like, in an intersection.
Yep.
And presumably load it up with some droid poppers, right? Which I do have questions on what this does to the droids. Does it just incapacitate them, or are they dead at that point?
I thought they were dead. Like,
okay.
Effectively dead. Like, you could probably take them back and recharge them to some degree, right?
Right.
But
if nobody did anything, it's not like these droids are gonna, like, wake up later with a headache.
No,
and
they're
be
not like
oh,
passed
what happened?
out. Yeah, they're not like the Robo version of passed out. You know?
Okay.
So.
And then, and then when the droids kind of surround this vehicle, and there is a cool moment where, like, a super battle droid just goes to, like, push this car out of the way.
Yeah.
And it totally moves, and then they kind of walk around it, and Steela hits a button, and boom, droid popper thing goes off. And this last droid, I don't feel like he sees any of these rebels, and, like, he calls in and is like, rebels attacked us, we need reinforcements.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Like, that's why it's so awkward, because, like, so much happens that the droid watches first, and then from an audience standpoint, there is a moment where the droid is standing there. In order for us to get an establishing shot of Steela looking through the scope of her rifle so that we see the droid is there, and then I think we even get a shot from Saw's vantage point seeing the droid, and they're both like, cool, it happened. We have to wait for this droid. So then everybody's watching this droid. We watch the droid walk around. Then it calls, and it's just a frustratingly long exchange.
Man, this would have been a great episode if it was like this droid just like keeps on walking and is like, oh, that was weird,
and just doesn't do any of it. Yeah.
And
So
like,
anyways, it calls in.
Lux has
He
to come
does
up with
call
another
in
plan.
Yeah, he calls in reinforcements. A tank does show up. But droidicas show up first. So they do the whole thing with the poppers, the slow roll and the poppers. So that finally gets paid off here, and it's as thrilling as it was last week watching them do that. We get Saw gets his in accurately. Lux and Steela. Lux does not. Steela then runs up and just sticks her hand slowly in one, lets go of the popper.
Yeah, she like slide tackles it with this popper thing.
Yeah, so that's how she gets one. Then the tank shows up. Then we get that double move of them throwing poppers inside the two hatches. Then they take over. There's this comedic moment where Saw can't turn on the tank, and they're like, hey, we need to move. We need to get this tank going.
Is it comedic? I think it's meant to be comedic.
Yeah,
I think it falls flat.
It's I put comedic as an attempt, like it was clearly meant to be. I agree with you that I was not pleased with any of that. Because again, like the previous moment with the droid calling for reinforcements, it's a moment that plays for far too long. Like much longer than necessary. Then they try and throw in these like other one-liners of Steela's like, oh, let me try it. And Saw's like, no,
it needs a woman's touch is what she says. So Saw gets in the tank, fuddles around. Lux is like, yo, bro, come on. And then Steela comes up and she's like, what's taking you so long? Oh, it needs a woman's touch. And then Saw climbs out. She climbs in. She does a thing, which is literally like reaching under the seat and plugging some shit in.
Yeah, which I don't know what this shit is. I don't know why it was necessary. I guess she's like re-hot wiring the tank after the popper or something. I don't fucking know. But then Saw then gets back in to drive the tank, to which I'm confused. I think I got it backwards from last week then, because I thought the lower frontal one was the driving mechanism, and I thought the top one was the gun turret.
I agree with you.
So I was really confused by that, and that just literally broke my brain or it generally really.
Either way, there's still two of them. There's Lux and Saw. Yeah. So there could be one person in each of these hatches, and right?
I don't know what's happening. Yeah.
But instead, in the hope of being secret, right? They don't want to reveal their presence. They do a terrible job because Saw has the top hatch open and he's like driving with his head sticking out the sunroof. Yep. And Lux is riding on the side of the thing.
Yeah, just
not concealed at all.
Yep. So that's weird. And then so what happens is they drive off to the power station. Ahsoka and Steela go to a different vantage point to try and cause a distraction to draw people or draw droids there so that they don't notice that the tank is coming and will fuck their shit up, I guess.
Yeah, but literally all they had to do was like wait, keep the hatches closed, drive the tank up, and fire the cannon.
I didn't get this point either, because what ends up happening is Steela and Ahsoka do start shooting at the droids, which distracts them only to the point that the tank basically just rolls up and barrels over them anyways.
But here's my point. She starts shooting. One of the droids says, hey, a sniper. And then she definitely attracts the attention of all of these droids. They start getting attacked. She has a sniper rifle. By definition, you can't continue to just take out multiple opponents with this. So she ends up pulling out like a hand blaster, right? Ahsoka is doing her little bit of defense stuff. But then, I don't know if it's the same droid or another droid looks up, and as the tank's coming in, he's like, hey, reinforcements. So they could have just rolled in with the tank, and nobody would be the wiser. Then you shoot one cannon blast at the door, You take out a bunch of these droids, then they would have started fighting. You would be one step up. Just saying.
But and then they add in this weird complication that is clearly just for tension building. They have the tank shoot the first door, blast through that door. There's a secondary door. They blast that, and then
the cannon is recharging.
Yeah, it's recharging at the wait, and then Steela is like, "Why aren't you shooting?" And it's like, "Hey, it's recharging. We have to wait." And I'm like, "Wait, when did that ever happen? What?"
Well, not only that, like they have to escalate the conflict as well, and we've got standard battle droids and super battle droids throughout this episode. And those have not proved to be particularly difficult for this group to take out. Then we had the droidicas. They overcame those. But now we get commando droids, which we have seen whoop up on Jedi in the past.
Yep.
And these people who have had one day of training.
Yep.
And they're on day number 2. Which is their first day of assault, an attack, and they don't have a problem with these commando droids at all. Lux does get punched in the face a couple of times because he's dumb and he's hanging out on the outside of the car instead of the inside of the car, right?
Yeah.
But that's like the worst thing that happens to any of these people during this assault. So
after they take care of the commando droids, the thing recharges. They do destroy the generator. Basically the power in the entire city goes out. So then, with no light coming from anywhere, all the rebels have night vision goggles.
Yeah.
So they use those to just start taking down the droids, which I don't know. I feel like we've seen them see in the dark before, but for whatever reason, those IR things aren't on this time.
Yeah, one of the droids does say, "Oh man, the power went out. Switch to infrared mode," and then that's like they're already being attacked at that point. But it's, I don't like these night vision things, these night vision goggles at all, especially because there's like explosions and fires and electricity and blasters and shit. Like if they were actually night vision goggles and the Arabesh on the inside view says night vision view, but anytime there's like a flash of light or like any of this stuff, maybe it's better technology than like night vision goggles that I've heard of, but it would like fry their vision. I don't know. Like there's
where
one
like
point
it would go bright white, like.
Right, there's one point where there's a character wearing these, and I don't remember which character it is, but they're like staring at like a fire or something, or an explosion or something that's going on.
Well, at some point, Ahsoka, when she puts on the goggles, she's still standing in front of the inferno of the power station.
Yes.
So, like, from the camera's normal vantage point, there's still a hell of a lot of light going on. It looks like the end scene from 1917, essentially.
Right.
You know,
haven't seen that one. I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, there's a scene where there's like a giant burning church and everything's lit real decently. You know, not great, but you can still see things. Night vision, not necessary. But this is when Ahsoka throws on the night vision goggles, which I don't know. But so they do take out all the droids, and then like real quickly and randomly, there's like one citizen that's like, "Hey, it's the rebels, go rebels!" And
then everybody starts cheering and stuff. They have earned their public support,
right, from just all of that. So everybody's real chill with the rebels after all of that now.
Nobody was like, "Why the fuck did you blow up all the power to the fucking town?"
Right. So then from here, we start another strange series of scenes that are oddly expository. So now I'm gonna forget. We cut back to the safe house for the rebels, right?
Well, okay, so the king like sees what's going on, and he says, "Oh, we can use this to our advantage." Then we go back to the safe house, and Saw's like, "Let's celebrate," and picks his sister up in the air and twirls her around. She gives Lux a hug. Ahsoka is totally jealous, and then Obi-Wan and Anakin Skype call in, and Obi-Wan, or I don't remember what Obi-Wan says, but Anakin is like lecturing Ahsoka to like stay focused. Like, he totally knows what's going on.
Right.
Which means to me, Obi-Wan knows what's going on and is just like, hey, you fucking deal with it. Then we cut over to the king. The king is talking to Dooku, eating his Jogan fruit. And he complains that the droids that Dooku sent him aren't good enough. He needs better replacements. And Dooku's like, I will honor your request, but I'm also sending Kalani, which is a tactical droid. And I thought it odd that this particular tactical droid had a name.
I agree.
They don't normally, like, you know, it's not just like TD-187 or whatever, you know, like tactical droid assignment. Murder number, like, you know, whatever. And then we go back to the rebels. Like, Dooku had expressed his displeasure, like, hey, I thought that you could rule the planet, which tells me that he set up the election for this king or whatever.
Right.
Then we're back to the rebels, and Saw like starts to give a pep talk, and then I think Lux gives a little pep talk, Steela gives a little pep talk, and then this random rebel that we haven't actually seen fighting at all is like, hooray for everything. Who's with me? Let's vote Steela as our leader. And everybody raises their hand and she wins. And then you can tell that Saw is butthurt about this, and he like goes to wander off, and Lux is like, oh, just give him some time, he'll calm down. And Steela's like, no, I can't do that. And Ahsoka says, why? And she's like, he's my brother.
Yeah, it's...
And we get a weird look from Ahsoka, and cue loud music, like that's the end of it.
Yeah, cue loud music. Why was that a reveal? Why did that need to be a reveal?
I mean, I had the question last week of what their relationship was, so I'm okay with that being a reveal. My question is, why does that have to be like the episode closer? Because it seems like we had an ending a few times, and then we're like, nope, we still need to... I want this information out here. Like, let's continue with...
But why was this information that needed to be held for a cliffhanger-ish sort of reveal? That's what I mean. Like, why wasn't... Yeah. Like, why wasn't this something that was just a one-liner in the previous episodes? Like, oh, hey, I'm Saw. This is my sister, Steela. Cool. Great. What would that have changed in these last two episodes?
Nothing. It wouldn't change anything.
So that's why, like, this moment of the reveal just makes everything else more strange. Like, that twirl that happens between Saw and Steela plays out really weird too, because like for a hot second they're trying to make it like, oh, maybe they're a couple if you are unaware that they're siblings. Right. But again, for me, even if I didn't have that confirmation that they were siblings, like, again, the visual cue that I have is that they have the same eyes. So for me, it was very clear from the start that they're related. So then for them to even try and put this weird flash of like affectionate celebration is really weird to me.
Yeah.
And then even just the line delivery of everything else is so wrong.
I think it's supposed to be some weird thing playing into like that love triangle thing where like it gives like Ahsoka a little bit of like, you know, she can like take a deep breath and be like, like she's not going to steal my boy Lux because they're together, and then immediately
It's
Steal
so misplaced, though. It's
I
so
don't know.
misplaced.
It's so weird.
Because again, it's like the line reading too, and generally speaking, the voice acting is fine, but the way the last couple of lines plays out, it reminds me of like the weird sort of breathy way that Amy Adams has to talk to a fucking Batman in Batman versus Superman.
Okay.
Where it's like, where Ahsoka's like, wait, why do you have to run after him? Well, he's my brother. And it just reminds me of that weird fucking moment where it's like, why did he say that name? Martha's his mother. Like, it's such a weird tonal shift that it's just so ridiculous. Like,
I'm with you.
it's just like, what? Who? Oh my god! Like, I know, especially with voice act. Like, it's one thing when like Amy Adams and Ben Affleck are in the same fucking room, and you have Ben Affleck yelling at you, and your response is, "It's his mother." And I get here though that they're likely not in the same fucking room, so they're just taking whatever direction that they're getting. Right. That said, the end product is what matters, and it just plays so fucking weird that it was just this. It was just bad, man. Like, I didn't understand the reveal, and then it closes in on Ahsoka, who has this like dumb fuck look on her face as well. Like, yeah, man. I'm just.
It's an appropriate description. I got nothing to rebut to that.
Yeah, no, I'm just skipping straight ahead. I'm just gonna call it. There's a fucking thumbs down for me. Like,
okay,
this is a stronger thumbs down than last week. Like, for me, it gets worse. I was generally okay with this episode. Like, I didn't like this episode.
Okay,
but it was going along, and then like the weird fucking end. Like, it should have just basically closed out when they blew the main power station and did one final attack, maybe, or at least like the main power station should have done something to get the citizens' side, or get them on the citizens' side, or the citizens on their side, shall I say? Words, I can figure out words. But then we get this extra attack scene in the dark, which leads to the citizens going, "Yay, rebels!" Then we get 3 scenes of setup for other shit.
I'd be okay with like the Dooku stuff going on after the attack.
At most, the Dooku stuff, but it was still just like. It was like Return of the King-ish, almost like, oh, there's another scene. There's another scene. Oh, there's one more scene. Oh, there's this weird fucking reveal now. Great. And that said, the rest of the episode already, to me, suffers the same problem that last week's episode did. Okay. Which is the pacing of this, the way scenes are handled. It's like, I get the point of every scene. Okay. But the fact that, like, these scenes are just so, I don't know, they're like
McClunky.
Yeah, they're quite McClunky. They have like a weird rhythm to it where it's like, okay, like every scene almost, instead of like a goal, there is one goal throughout the whole episode, but then like every scene, instead of just kind of like organically flowing, they jump to a scene and it's like, oh, we need to get a droid head for schematics, and then like within 30 seconds he does that. Next scene, oh, there are droids here and here, now we need a tank, so they get a tank, right? It's
like it's like a montage that's slowed down with dialogue, right?
Yeah.
I will agree with you on your thumbs down appraisal of this situation. The first time I watched this episode was directly after recording last week's episode, and I was like, wow, this one is so much better. And then I watched it again, took some notes, and I was like, okay, it's not as good as I remember it, Here are a couple things that I will say, and this one almost got a thumbs up from me, and here's why. The newsreel of this episode could have eliminated last week's episode. Like, we didn't even need that, because everything that happened was succinctly explained to us at the beginning of this. Okay?
Yeah.
And then I felt like, really, for like the first 2/3 of this episode, it moved along at a good pace. Like, I understand what you're saying with the pacing of things and how it's McClunky jumping from one thing to the next, and like definitely an Easter egg hunt. Like, okay, we need this thing, and now we need this thing, and now we need to do this, and now we need to do this. But in comparison to a war on two fronts, this felt smoother. Okay. And then the last 4 minutes lost me as far as
those last 4 minutes drag. Oh my God.
I don't often, and I don't know. What am I trying to say? I thought the episode was over multiple times, and then there was like more things that were happening and more things that were happening, and I didn't feel like those were necessary. Like, if we took those 4 minutes and smoothed some stuff out and built this plan to begin with, then I think my opinion would be better. And honestly, what tipped me downwards is our discussion today, which I try usually not to let affect my thumbs up, thumbs down, but it definitely did.
Right. Well, because here's regarding those last 4 minutes, this is what especially bothered me, is the fact that in terms of time spent watching everything up to that point, it felt like a full 22 minutes already. The fact that it wasn't is what made me realize how shitty this episode was. We're like,
the first time I looked at the timestamp, like thinking, expecting, oh, there's 5 minutes left. Like we've got another 1 minute of like recap, and then it's gonna be 4 minutes of credits. It was only 14 minutes into the episode,
right?
Of a 25-minute episode,
right? That's exactly what I mean. So like, that's how I knew the spacing was not good, when I was like, no, I really thought we were already at that like 22-minute mark. But I guess we're at 18.
Right.
Shit. That's not good. So to your point, I these two episodes easily could have been combined to make one snappier episode for sure. We could have gotten the training as a montage. It would have established pretty much the exact same thing that we needed to have established. Everything else that they wanted established in that episode from last week easily could have been put in the montage or then built upon afterwards. So like the droid popper thing, that's something we can see them failing in the montage. That's not a difficult thing to do, but we'll see them succeeding at other tasks, right?
Well, I mean, not only that, like that specific thing is re-explained in this episode. Like Saw does it and it works, and he looks at Lux and he's like, throw it slowly so it makes it through the thing. And Lux is like, I know, and then it bounces off the shield, and Saw's like, you fucked it up, dude.
Right.
And
well, that's what I'm saying.
Lux is like, yeah, well, I blame you. Like, you
distracted
psyched me out, man.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, with some tightening up, you save stuff like that when you mash them in the same episode. So then, therefore, you don't have to re-explain it, because for some reason, in a series, you're going to assume that somebody missed last week's, which I guess in 2012 is a possibility, but DVRs were pretty darn common in 2012.
Even if you do miss the last episode, it doesn't matter.
Right. But that's there is not enough material for these two episodes, and I do not know why they need to be stretched out as such at all. There's so much dragged on, especially when you're trying to then. What scares me is because of the information dump we got in the last 4 minutes that we're gonna get it again in the newsreel.
Mm-hmm.
And then even when we get to the story proper for the follow-up episode here, it'll probably get re-explained one more time. Like, I fucking bet you at some point we're going to get Ahsoka sitting down with Steela and being like, I didn't know he was your brother.
Mm-hmm.
Please explain to me how Saw is your brother. How does brothers work? What does that mean? Like, we're going to get some dumb fuck conversation on, like, how siblings exist in general, right? Like, this is the level that we're working with here, and it's just upsetting. So...
Yeah, so what do we got coming up next week?
Next week we got the Soft War. Is that where we're at?
The soft porn?
The Soft War.
Soft war. Okay.
Soft War.
I do not like these episode titles. I did not like A War on Two Fronts.
Yeah, front runners means nothing.
Do not like front runners. That means nothing to me as well.
Absolutely nothing. Something tells me the fortune cookie for next week will apply to this one. Like, you know, it'll be something weird like, in the darkness, we can see brighter than day. Like,
nice.
That's how angry I am. I'm just making up fortune cookies for this shit at this point. Like,
hey, somebody's got to do it. Yeah, my expectations are that next week at some point in time, I will put my head in my hand and I'll be shaking my head.
Yeah. This is just bad because, like, again, the only reason I remember, I remember the training episode from last week. So last week's the episode I remember. This episode I had no memory of. The only reason I had any memory of this shit at all, again, as I mentioned last week, is because of the renewed importance of Saw Gerrera in the franchise, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've given up on that.
Yeah, so the fact that we're now sitting down rewatching it, these episodes, this run, and they're this bad, I'm just like, Jesus Christ, man. Like, that's the character you pulled to make super cool and important, and you brought in Forrest fucking Whitaker to play? Like,
I would like to see these episodes redubbed by Forrest Whitaker, and I wonder if I don't think my opinion would change, but I feel like I would have smiled more.
Maybe. But here's the thing. The character Forrest Whitaker ends up playing, to me, is so different than what we see here. Like, I'm okay with my mind wrapping that they are one character, but the Forrest Whitaker version is so much more grizzled by 20 solid years of fight, right? That I can't imagine him trying to soften up for this version of it. This, like, slightly, I wouldn't say idealistic version, but this like the future is open for us to fight back, right? Yeah, I don't know. You got anything else on this episode?
That's it, man.
So until next week, we got the Soft War. If you'd like to reach out to us at any point, the easiest place to do that would be notthenerds.com. That said, we always like to give a thanks to Anthony at Blue the Beard on Twitter. He's the fella that put together that website for us. So YouTube links are there, social media links, all that stuff, I believe. But, you know, like, comment, subscribe at anywhere you're hearing this stuff. But also, we always like to thank Lindsay at Strange Fancy Music at gmail.com. Sorry. Yep. She's the one that put together the jingle that you hear at the beginning and end of every episode. We also like to thank our buddy Kevin, who put together the cover art that you see. And he can be found at They Call Me K-Dub on Twitter. So, you know, I've been Lorenzo.
Kevin Horde here.
These aren't the nerds you're looking for.
Bye-bye.